my presentation is about idle games, and the reason why I wanted to make this presentation is it comes from the experience that I had my first time with an idle game. So what happened is that I downloaded for the first time a tapper, and I got very hooked. Like I played for many days, many weeks actually. I was surprised by how long I played it, because my expectation was that this is a very simple game. There's no way I could be caught by it so much. And then I kind of felt a bit of guilt, like, why am I spending so much time in such a simple game? And then I got curious about it, and I started to look for reactions of other people. I started looking on the internet, on the forums, and I saw that, like, most people had similar stories. There's reviews who start by, I am ashamed to admit that I spent so many hours on this game, right? Or why is everybody on the planet seem to be playing this tapper game? So I started to search. I got interested. I actually started to develop one of these types of games. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about them, about these games, is because I saw two sides of the coin. So on one side, when I talked to people in the game development community, and actually with some of the players, I had a strong bias. I saw a strong bias against this type of game, right? So the kinds of things that people would say would be, look, there's no action phase really. There is no challenge. There is no mastery. There's no context. It's actually just a very simplified way for people to get easy rewards without doing anything, right? On the other hand, I was really excited because I saw what the players were saying, players who play tappers, and actually was convinced that this is the birth of a new genre. Was looking at like trends on the App Store, and actually I was actually convinced that this is something important happening. And I saw that this type of game had its own audience, had its own rules, had its own mechanics, and I saw people making walkthroughs, making guides on Reddit. They were engaged for a very long time. They were becoming masters at this game, and there was this disconnect, right? And I wanted to understand what is going on, and now tell you what I've learned. So, what we'll be talking about today. So, this is a short summary. So, I will talk a bit about the history of idle games, so that we can put a bit of context. We'll talk a bit about the profiles, the psychological profiles of the players, who plays them, right? And then we'll talk about the mechanics and the rules. And there is a point that I want to make there, which is I believe that games, good games, are about brain stimulation. I think that the principles of good game design apply to all types of games. And I will take some examples and show that this applies to idle games as well. And last, we'll talk a bit about trends and what is happening, why I think that the time was now for such a game and such mechanics and such player profiles to appear. So, to the history of idle games. So the first time somebody thought to make such a game was Progress Quest. I think many of us who are a bit older know about it. This was a parody, right? So there's this guy who started making a game where you don't do nothing, and it was a parody to the endless grind of RPGs, right? You just open your browser, and the game plays by itself. And it goes in an adventure and gets fights with monsters. You do nothing, right? It got an amazing response, and so many people playing it. The second one that's considered very important is Cow Clicker. So Progress Quest introduced idle progression. Cow Clicker introduced clicking. apparently for no reason. So this guy was trying to make fun. It was a Facebook game about Facebook games, right? It said you had some cows. Every hour you got one click. You click on the cow. The cow went moo, and you got some progression, and people went crazy about this game. So clicking is introduced by this game. Idle progress is by Product Quest. Candy Box is a bit more complex. You just start with a screen where it says you have 1 candy, 2 candies, 3 candies, and some simple choices. I can throw the candies on the ground, or I can eat the candies, and so on. But it progressed into something, an adventure where you could use those candies and got actually quite far. It would get you get a village, you get houses you could upgrade, and so on. The first game that combined the two mechanics, like idle progress and clicking, was Cookie Clicker. I think many people played it. And it also introduced the concept of geometric progression. Right? So the progression wasn't linear anymore, it went crazy, very high numbers. This is where I got interested, to be honest. Like, Cookie Clicker was not my cup of tea that much, but I got hooked about this stage. So Clicker Heroes introduced RPG elements. Very simplified RPG elements. It's an RPG without too much story, without too much fantasy in it, but it's a very simplified RPG element where you have heroes that you can hire and then upgrade and then evolve and so on, and they just go and fight with monsters forever. Bitcoin Millionaire, I think it was the first success on mobile. It got quite a bit of promotion and a bit of media. Again, a very simple game. Tap Titans, I think, was the first commercial success on mobile. It introduced not only heroes that you can get, it introduced a whole layer of meta game, which is very long, with artifacts and other things you can purchase that will help you progress faster after you prestige. But most importantly, introduced social competition. So from my point of view, a lot of this success of this was when players actually were fighting. They had to have the skill to progress really fast on ladders and compete against each other. Actually, Tap Titans 2, which is now doing better than in terms of engagement and revenue as well, introduced guilds and a lot of complexity. Well, I'll talk about it more in depth. And now, the last one that I want to mention is, I think this is the most modern one, is Idle Heroes. So I checked up Annie just before coming here, maybe the numbers, so you know, the grain of salt, could be maybe not 100% accurate, but it's a game that in the last month made about $250,000 per day on average. And in the few months that it was released, it got to $30 million. So it's an idle game, right? I think it's the most modern of them all. It actually introduces a lot of elements like gacha and heroes and more depth in the choice that you make. But it's still an idle game. And they did away with the prestige system, which I think is something, again, special about it. But what I want to say is that we started with parodies. The genre didn't take itself very seriously. We kind of bumped into this mechanic. And then it evolved to having games where a lot of people are engaged, and they're actually financial successes. So there is something about this genre. I don't know if you know, there are 2 Romanian idle games. One is Mad CEO, done by Capsule, and the other one is Tap Busters, done by Metagame. Next, I would like to talk a bit about the players. We know now more about the type of players, and I'm talking very specifically about the mobile market, which is the one that I know most about. So people who, what do they like, right? What kind of players are they? So people who play idle games are interested in progression. So they will be interested in getting all the achievements, becoming quite powerful, progressing, right? Getting all the items and everything else. They will be very interested about optimization, right? And I think both of these are very, very natural tendencies, right? We like to organize, optimize things, put things in order, maybe a bit of OCD in many of us, but a game like this kind of triggers it. And it's about time management. What's very surprising is that when you go to forums and all that, people who play idle games, they actually consider that they're the most effective of all players, right? Because I can take my phone, I can progress when I'm not playing, I can leave it on the desk next to me, I can fill all the empty spaces in my day. So actually the view about how they play is a bit the opposite of what we think. Like you're wasting time. No, actually I'm using my time the most effectively that I can. They're a bit interested in skill. So especially after Prestige, the meta game, like the loops, go into, you play the game. Prestiging is when you cannot progress in the game anymore. You start over, but you get some items, some things that help you progress much faster, right? So ever since games like Tap Titans or Idle Heroes, Tap Busters, there are mechanics in there that are very similar to that of other games, right? There are builds that you can create with the items that you get, the things that you can equip, the heroes that you choose to evolve. There's a lot of strategy around it, and the skilled players, they know all these builds. It's very similar to what happens in any other game, right? And actually, quite in the latest games, the social layer starts to develop as well. So there's no reason why people don't play together socially, and I see interest in that as well. But mostly they're interested in progress, in optimization. Those are the main drives. And then as we started to add the meta game, right, and the mastery layer for long term, then the other elements started to equally as important, especially for the rest of the discussion, is what they're not interested in. And I'm not saying that they don't like it necessarily, but when they play, especially on mobile, they're not interested in these things. They're not interested in adrenaline. They're not interested in Twitch gameplay, right? So they're not in there for the rush that they would get from an action game. Even if they could play it on other platforms. They're not interested in story. There's a very interesting study done by a fantastic group of people called Quantic Foundry. Actually did a study about this, and actually the people who play these types of games on their computers, you will find games like very deep RPGs, like a game like I don't know, Mass Effect or Witcher or these types of games. But on mobile, they're very interested in the simplified RPG progression, right? So they're not really interested on story on mobile. They're not that much interested in customization. Now there's a game that I've seen, actually it's called Tap Tap Fish. It tries to combine these types of players with the very casual approach. You have coral reef with nice that you can customize and get really nice fishes. It's done by one guy. It's done fantastically financially, and it has a very, very solid following. So there could be ways that this genre could evolve. And now we go to the part I'm most passionate about. So I really think that we'll talk a bit about the design of this game. So there's a paradox of idle games. So this is why I call this presentation like this. Idle hands, active brains. I really think that it's impossible for a game, for a well-made game, to be successful without challenging the brain. It's ever since Ralph Koster and his amazing book, I always thought that a good game will stimulate your brain. So it's an apparent paradox, but what I wanted to show was that actually these games, even if you don't do many actions, they will stimulate the brain. So I think one of the things that our brain likes to do is to solve problems, right? So I will give an example from a shooter, right? I have a situation, right? My brain, as it sees, even if it has to time or if it has to act really fast, registers the problem, imagine a solution, then executes it, and then gets satisfaction from executing it, right? This works while you play. The same thing happens if you watch, right? So in a game like other heroes, where you have a group of heroes that you selected based on the challenge of the level, then you imagine how it's going to work. You can play it or you can watch it. It works both ways. So what happens in idle games? So actually, the granularity is there. You always have a very simple problem. Maybe the problems are simpler, at least at the beginning, but then they evolve. You always have a problem to solve, right? Usually it's an optimization problem, which is how do I use the resources that I have most effectively to progress faster? A game like other heroes, there are some from time to time. There are challenges where you actually have to plan and watch, which is a mechanic that other games use very well as well. So you do solve problems in these games. Do you make decisions? Sure, you make the decision of how to optimize faster. But as you go into more modern adults, so this game has heroes that you can upgrade. It has abilities that your hero you can upgrade for your hero. It has pets that work with it. It has equipment, and it actually has a layer of artifacts that you can get. All of them are synergic, right? So you can create such an amazing variety of builds. It's actually, without reading, if you're going on Reddit and reading like quite complex walkthroughs and builds and understanding where in the game you are, you cannot really progress. You cannot master this type of game. So, and let's go to game design basics, right? Second gameplay. You can play actively, and this game, you will get faster progression, right? You will tap on things that give you more resources, or on special abilities. You will get special opportunities. Some of them are related to monetization, but some of them are usually related to progressing faster, getting things earlier. Difficulty in progression. We know that a good level design is bumpy, right? It's the same thing. The curve look a bit different, especially in the games that have a geometric progression of difficulty, but it's the same. You have variable difficulty, it gets harder, it gets easy. There are bosses, there are special encounters where you get stuck, and then it gets easier for a while. And this actually goes, these bosses and special encounters, when you have the prestige mechanic, you restart the game and then you get satisfaction because you know that if you played better or if you got the bonuses from prestige, those milestones, all that, you see that you get them go faster through them. So the same principles apply. It's just for people who are interested in this type of experience. So they're not that interested in the action. They'll be interested in progression, optimization. There are different type of things that they're interested in. On mobile especially, I think it's the rhythm, how you play the game is really important. And many of the successful games require to go back to the game. You have a period of intense focus, right? And then you go out of the game. And this is exactly what happens. So you have the challenge of progressing as fast as possible. You go out, there's a period of waiting, of anticipation. And one thing that is really interesting about, and I think it's very modern design, especially on mobile, is it always feels so good to come back. Actually, sometimes it feels better if you're late, right? Because you got even more resources, right? The more you wait, the better you'll feel when you come back because the game progressed. So you're gonna get a lot of rewards when you go back to the game. So you're always happy. And on mobile, especially where you fight for retention, this is really, really important. And the penalty is usually a missed opportunity, right? So if you don't come back, but tappers here are not gonna penalize you too much qualitatively. Usually it's gonna be just you didn't progress as fast as possible. But again, this is something very specific to mobile. Metagame, same principles apply. You prestige. This is a very specific mechanic for tappers. I actually tried to make a game without prestige, but because of the geometric progression, it's really, really hard. The meta loop, so the more you progress in the game, the modern games will give you many options, many ways to progress, and some of them are going to be more effective. So you have to master the game for long term, and you have to. There's enough content for months of play. So this is why people come back. And there's the social part, the guilds, everything that you would expect from the metagame of other types of other genres of games. So the point that I wanted to make was that the same things apply when you think about game mechanics. The same principles apply, but you just need to understand how to apply those principles for the type of experience that people want. Talking about trends. So I've done mobile games for all my life. I'm looking now at the App Store, and what I see is the exceptions are a few. I actually see that the only trend I can see with Supercell games is like they seem to be pushing, both of their latest games are about esports. But what I see is that there are story-driven games that are doing really well. There's design and customization games. Like the story-driven games are like story choices, Guardianscapes. The design and customization, the icon on the left is Covet Fashion, which is for a game that is targeted at girls and how you dress up with these different challenges. It's doing very well. Design Home is a game for people who, I think Travis mentioned yesterday, for people who like to nest, like to tinker with their homes. So those are the exceptions for the other genres that we already know. And it's the idle games that I think that we're talking now that are also another thing that is happening. And actually, some of the idle, because of how we use the mobiles, some of the idle mechanics, there's an icon there which is lineage. This is still something quite specific to the Asian market, but lineage is an MMO, right? It's one of the most famous MMOs. It has great graphics, amazing depth. When it's launched on mobile, as soon as you start, there's an option that says auto questing. What does happen when you click on auto questing? Your character starts towards the closest quest giver, takes the quest. The quest giver says, well, we have a problem with wolves. You have to kill 6 wolves. Okay, you press OK. Your character goes automatically, walks on the map there, starts fighting with the wolves. You can intervene at any time, right? But you can, once it kills 6 wolves, it goes back to the quest giver, right? So then you're saying, what's the point? And I think many people in the Western, of the Western players don't really like that. But what happens in Asia is that actually people spend time doing other things, right? They socialize a lot. They look at ways to optimize their build. They spend time doing other things while the game does this progress. Takes away this part, which is not so it's a bit of a chore, right? So I think some of these mechanics are bringing out in other genres. And I will talk about this in this next slide. I think sometimes Mihai Pohontu had an amazing presentation yesterday where he tried to identify trends, and I think sometimes trend, like, you can look at it from a big like from top down, right? So you can see this amazing trend happening in AI or neuroscience or other domain, but sometimes there are changes are happening more progressively, and they happen because we're actually changing our habits. What I see now is that there's this new audience, and sometimes there's change behavior. So players who will play an RPG on PC, they are going to be interested in story. They play it on mobile, they're not going to be interested in story that much. I think the way we consume media influences our habits, our patterns, and because the brains are quite plastic, we actually behave differently over time. Like 5 years ago, it would be a choice if you went to the App Store whether you purchase a game or not. Now, it's not even a choice anymore. It's a non-decision. For most players, they don't even consider a game if it's paid, right? And that happened because we already got it. We grokked it. We don't go through that decision loop anymore, right? So the way that we behave influences. So I'm watching my kid, I'm watching the youngster today. They go to YouTube, instead of playing, he has like 1 hour to play per day, right? On Saturdays and Sundays. He will go there and he will prefer to watch. He'll go to YouTube, watch a walkthrough, watch a YouTuber play instead of playing himself. That's a different way of behaving. So convenience becomes important for us. I think the aversion to loss is another trend, and the aversion to even to micro traumas. So that's why people are going to react well to a system that doesn't penalize you, but gives you like you don't progress as much, but I don't penalize you. So I think it's important to watch these habits and see how they influence, because they might, in their term, influence the gaming genre. So this is the last slide. Is the takeaways would be habits that are born from how we use the media, the technology, will influence the gaming genres. But once you see a gaming genre being formed, and I think this is the case for idlers, the same principles apply, right? Games are about good brain simulation. In order to make a good game, you have to figure out how to apply these principles, game design principles, to this type of player and what they're interested in.
Do you think there's some geographical, cultural element to this? Because I haven't looked into this in as much detail as you have, but I live in the US, and I noticed that people there don't like those games. Same in Japan, but obviously they work really well in China and other places. I don't know if you have like some real data on this. That's number one. The number two is numbers are very niche thing. Like I always thought that you could make these games more popular by removing the numbers from the equation and making them about something else. I don't know if anybody has done that like well, or if that's crazy because you need the geometrical progression, whatever. But those are the two questions I had.
Yeah. So what I've seen is that for many of these games, if you look at the player and revenue share, this is like more widespread. It's not all a US centric game type of game. So yes, but I see them growing as well. So I think prestige is something that these games have to figure out. The numbers and prestige are the things that if they figure out, they're gonna make a leap, because prestige means that you give up all your progress and then you start over, and that's a big emotional. You don't want to do that when the first time you get there, and the numbers make them look like a bit geeky, and the numbers go so high that you go to scientific notation, and people are going to be put off by that. But I see that the like idle heroes did away with many of those things, and it's having a lot more success. So I think your intuition is great, but I think they evolve. So what I can tell you is that I see them progressing in terms of popularity and how many people play them. So I don't know how it's going to go forward, but I see a trend here, and I see people being influenced